To be entirely honest, I've been sitting here for 10 minutes trying to figure out the right words to describe this manga. It is quite easily one of the most enjoyable things I've had the pleasure to experience in a very long time. This isn't a new story. This is something that has been around for quite some time, a couple of years now, many years now, and yet it feels completely rare to see people actually talk about it. I barely see people mention it. I know it has an anime, and I believe it was somewhat well received, but the manga is on a completely different playing field. This is a story that has so much untapped potential, so much quality assurance, so many enjoyable characters that you will fall in love with, a journey that is so well thought out and conceptualized, a backdrop of fantasy that is so unique and creative and inviting, all swirled together with this false sense of security with its artistry. It looks cute and cuddly and kind, yet you will quickly find out the harsh reality of the journey that they're going on, that there is stuff worse than death. The sheer intensity of those emotions, of those experiences, and what the abyss truly takes you through. This isn't a kind story whatsoever, but one that will easily push you to your limit and tear your soul apart. But it is completely worth it. Undoubtedly, unequivocally, 100% worth the experience. So with all of that, let's begin. Made in Abyss follows a story around a young character known as Riko. She's a young explorer wanting to one day become an infamous white whistle. What do you explore, they ask? Well, this city that they currently live in is built around this column that pierces deeply into the ground, which is known as the Abyss. And within this abyss holds a vast majority of differing things. Super unique and creative relics, stuff that is revolutionary, stuff that could change the world, stuff that can be sold for a very high price up on the surface. Creatures and monsters and entities and things alike that are completely unimaginable, that aren't human, that aren't of this world. And the lower you get into the abyss, the more complex and creative and out of control they truly become. The journey to become a diver, to become an explorer, a cave raider is what they're known as, is not an easy one. It is a perilous journey, one that is accompanied by death every single time you enter the abyss, as the sheer vertical shaft descending into the ground harbors a curse, a force field, if you will. This curse comes into play as you ascend the abyss, so the deeper you go, the worse the effects of ascending up out of it actually are. This would be directly known as the curse of the abyss, and it is always there with you. Differing layers have different effects, and the amount changes drastically between them. So you may descend to the first layer, explore around, come back up, and you may feel a little bit sick. But you may descend to the 5th or 6th layer, and you may lose your humanity. You may lose your physical form, you may lose your body. If you ascend more than 10 meters above yourself, you will lose your whole identity. You will basically be turned inside out in the most horrific and gruesome way possible. All of this does not stop Riko, however. She is someone that is very genuine, someone that is very passionate about this because her mother, being a white whistle, Liza, is one of the best out there. Now, Riko hasn't seen her mother basically since she was born, and there's a lot of reasons for that. She took one last dive after Riko was born and has never returned. The allure, the curiosity to dive into the abyss, to raid it, to figure out its secrets is something that compels a lot of different individuals, and Riko is one of them. Being from a small orphanage, she doesn't really have many opportunities to do so, but she takes her time. She tries to push through. She tries to do things her way, at the closest you could get to safety. In one of these very simple and training expeditions, she comes across a creature, so to speak, one that is very humanoid and one that she confuses to be robotic. This boy would later be known as Reg, someone that seems very mechanical in design, still has humanity about himself, still very much is human but has mechanical body parts and is not affected by the curse of the abyss whatsoever. He can move three-dimensionally. Reg would lose his memories and be brought back up to the orphanage where Riko resides, and they would befriend each other. They would talk about the abyss, they would talk about a lot of different things, and they would come up with the idea that it is time for Riko to descend down into the abyss, but there is a reason for it. Something would come back from the abyss that would lure Riko down there even further, that would make her pull the trigger on actually going to the bottom of the abyss. A place that has never been explored, a place that has never been explained, a place that no one has returned from. Barely, if any, information whatsoever. A note would be pulled from the abyss, and it is supposedly from Riko's mother, or someone that is at the bottom of the abyss. But they will wait at the bottom till she evidently arrives. This kickstarts Riko's journey into the abyss, and even though she is very young, she's got her head on her shoulders. She has a lot of information at her disposal, and the only thing that she is basically prone to is the curse, really, as well as the creatures, as well as the harsh environments that they're in. Basically everything within the abyss, she is prone to it. But she's not afraid. She wants to learn more, she wants to experience more, and she wants to do her best to get to the bottom of the abyss, a place where no one can return from. So with the help of Reg, her newfound companion and friend, they prepare themselves accordingly, they sneak out one night, and they set foot on their journey. This would be the start of their story, and their journey into the abyss as they go lower and lower and encounter many more people and many more things that will completely change their view on everything they have ever known. So this is Made in Abyss. Hopefully it entices, it intrigues. Still very watered down, but I didn't want to give away all too much information, at least in terms of details on what actually happens, what the beginning of the story provides you, and just how much information it's willing to bring across. For me, the experience with Made in Abyss has been nothing but phenomenal, and I cannot put that lightly. It's very rare that I fall headfirst into a story so deeply. It usually takes me a bit of time to get accustomed to the storytelling experience or the artwork being used or anything along those lines, really, but Made in Abyss felt so comfortable. Maybe I was just intrigued at this journey that they were about to go on that was filled with so much potential and life and creativity. Or maybe I was just super impressed with how well this story is actually handled with all of its characters. Whatever it was, or all of it was, it hooked me. It dug its claws in deep and would not let go. And I found myself reading 5, 10, 15, 20 chapters at a time, and hours would fly by. I would lose track of time. I would feel so absorbed into a story, just learning about its world, about its characters, about its inhabitants, and like every different thing within it. It's very rare for a story to do that. Even more so rare for a story to show it off so well. Simply put, it is charming. It is a breathtaking experience, but one that completely takes you off guard. As I mentioned at the beginning, it provides a false sense of security. Look at this artwork. It's very minuscule and creative and pretty and cute and cuddly, and it looks very innocent, but very quickly you will find out just how gruesome it can truly be. And it's not to throw a curveball, it's not to make you sick for no reason or anything along those lines. It's not used in a fickle or artificial way. It is used to showcase the brutality of the abyss. This is a different ecosystem in its entirety, and each level they go down, each depth and stage that they go through, it will challenge it more and more. It will get worse and worse. There is a lot of ways that they do this, but it's usually propelled through the lingering idea of the curse of the abyss. Basically, how I explained it before is that if you ascend, go upwards, more than 10 meters above yourself, you will be hit with the curse, almost in an instant. It's a very similar concept to diving within water.
I am under the water, please help me.
The amount of pressure that's coming on top of you and all of the difficulties that can face internally within your own body while diving within water, and all of this pressure and gases and everything in between can drastically affect you. And if you're really not careful, it can take your life just as easy. This is basically Made in Abyss, except descending into the abyss doesn't really have much of an issue. There's not all too many things you have to worry about other than just general fatigue. It's as soon as you start going up, that's when it piles on instantly. And the deeper you go, the worse it actually gets. To a point where around about the 6th level, which is very far underground, you cannot return. You cannot go up from here. But by this point, the story has changed in its entirety. It has completely evolved from what it was at the beginning, with just Riko and Reg, to a whole cast of characters that is so beautifully fleshed out, that is so enjoyable, that is so unique and creative, that provide different aspects and just explore different realms of possibilities. It is completely out of this world. To be honest, I could sit here for so long and just talk about how great the Abyss is, how great the creativity is within it, how complex it truly gets, how mind-altering it gets. It's just something you don't expect. Like, I fully 100% guarantee if you read this story, you will be surprised just what's in it. It is not for the faint of heart. It is not a kind story by any means. It looks kind. It looks cute and playful and cuddly, but it is anything but that. And it's funny because it works so well with its artistry. It's got this very painterly, mystical element to it. It's kind of difficult to explain properly, but I think its artwork is so unique to itself that it helps paint the picture of what this world is and where they're going so extremely well. There will definitely be times where you feel confused about what you're looking at, undoubtedly, but with its perspective and its approach in showcasing these very unique elements, there's so much attention to detail that goes into it that you honestly latch on to how much it gives you. So you have a full, fleshed out understanding of what this world is like, or what the Abyss is like, or what this creature or monster or this a level of the Abyss is like. It is completely and entirely fantasy driven, yet you have not read a story that resembles anything like it. Nothing that I can think of translates from other stories within this world. Even the characters or the people that they encounter are so unique and creative in themselves. Like, Riko is just a lovable character. You can't help but just want to support her journey. And then Reg is someone that's slowly trying to remember the memories that he lost, but he is super supportive as well, and he's super strong and powerful and becomes the strength of this journey. And the combination between them is just lovely. They work together so well. They provide this super endearing duality, and they grow. They experience the Abyss together. But over time, they start adding more people to their party. But it doesn't come without their fair shares of difficulties, heartbreaks, soul-wrenching situations. I don't even want to talk about the Nanachi and MIDI stuff because that is probably one of the hardest elements for this story. The hardest pill to swallow. I don't know what the author was doing or what mindset they were in when they created the Nanachi and MIDI stuff, but that will tear you apart. It will ruin your soul. And it's not something that just disappears. It kind of lingers for a very long time, all the way up to the most recent of chapters. It's one of the most heartbreaking situations that you can read, and it's so well thought out. It's so unique, but just tragic and painful. That's not even the only one. There's another character known as Prushka, which I don't even want to talk about either because that is just as disturbing and just as emotional. I do not think my words do enough justice in describing how absolutely soul-crushing these moments are, and how they're shown to you is so visual. It is something that will shock you. It's something that will make you most likely recoil back into your seat and be like, oh my god, like this is very overwhelming. It will do this, undoubtedly, but it's handled with so much care and love. You can't help but fall in love with these characters, and over time they all kind of come together and create this very strong combination between themselves, and they all face their hardships, they all face their problems, and it's all provided to you by the Abyss to kind of aid this, because it's not all just the creatures that they have to worry about, that it's not just the monsters or the things that the Abyss actually gives birth to that they have to worry about, right? There is whistles, people, cave raiders that are just as obnoxious, that are completely disgustingly distorted, that you can't even comprehend the reality of it. There is one character, there's two characters, but there's one character specifically that I absolutely love, and one that is absolutely horrendous, not in its design or approach or how it's handled, but just the being himself is a horrendous human being. Can't even call him human. He doesn't act human, he doesn't seem human, his morality or ideology is not that of a human, and he is a disgusting individual. The first one that I love, Ozen, she is incredible. She is the first person you will meet, and she is the first person that changes your perspective of the story. So we go from this cute, cuddly exploration manga to Ozen, and Ozen really shifts your perspective into how depressing and egotistical and dark this story can truly be. Not all of it, but it definitely opens up the gates for it, and she's a perfect character for it. Someone that has basically seen it all, someone that is so closely connected with Riko and her mother specifically. So there's a genuine connection somewhat, and it's a very weird one. The other character is known as Bondred. He is also a white whistle, similar to Ozen. They have like their own little hierarchy. And this man is a complete, utter menace. He is easily the best, I guess, antagonist of the story. But his whole ideology, his whole kind of mindset to what the Abyss is doing and how he wants to utilize it and learn about it and to create these other beings, so to speak, is so twisted and distorted. It is honestly disgusting. And you see the links that he goes through with Rico and everyone else, like they encounter him. It doesn't help that the two very soul-breaking stories that I mentioned, Nanachi and Midi and Prushka, are directly related to Bondred. The reason those stories will tear you apart is because of this one individual. He spreads fear, and he is someone that does not care. He is heartless, so to speak. And I say that weirdly because he has this odd approach to himself, this very intricate way with words that's so kind and caring and loving, but his intention is completely elsewhere. He could say that he loves you and he cares about you and that he's going to support you, and then next thing you know, you find yourself on an operating table, being turned into a horrific relic of some kind while you're still alive. If you haven't already noticed, I have loved every moment of Made in Abyss. There is a bit of a flaw. It's like half and half. It's going to affect some people, and then it might not affect the other handful of people. It honestly depends, really. The only issue that I believe this story has is there is a lot of dialogue, and I mean a lot of overwhelming dialogue. It's like, of course you're going to be reading regardless. Like, that's the point, right? You expect dialogue, but there is an obnoxious amount sometimes that feels way too overwhelming. This story rarely tries to balance it. It's honestly just constantly fed to you, and it's very easy to be overfed. This is going to be the biggest and hardest hurdle for you if you start to read Made in Abyss. Maybe you got halfway through it, maybe you only checked out a handful of chapters, or maybe this is your first time hearing about it. If you read it, take your time with it. It's going to be overwhelming, I can almost promise you that. But if you're able to slowly fall in love with it or latch onto those certain elements or that exposition, anything in between, you will start to indulge more and more of it, and it will become almost effortless. It's difficult at the beginning because you're so new to it. You don't know what the story is about, you're learning all of these things, you're being introduced to characters, you don't know where to look. But when you start to get a bit more comfortable, all of that information becomes so valuable, and you might even find yourself going back and trying to read it again just so you can see all of that information that you potentially mentally blocked out because there was so much of it. I would say around about the 10 to 15 chapter mark is where you should be finding yourself kind of perfectly fine with the pacing and the amount of dialogue that you're actually getting. It rarely changes. Like, of course, between chapters, you're going to have some that are filled more with exposition and more that's filled with artistry and vice versa. But for the most part, what you're getting at the beginning is stuff that's going to be rather consistent throughout the entirety of the series. Obviously, the first handful of chapters are filled to the brim with a lot of dialogue, but I think that's a beautiful thing about it, is that it feels very natural as well, because you get so much lore that just makes everything feel authentic and real, and stuff that doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. It provides nothing for you. It's not even important to read, but it's just a side conversation that's there to fuel a bit more of that lore. It's crazy because a lot of stories will avoid doing this for this exact reason, because it's overwhelming, because it's pointless, because there's no real reason for it. But if you're able to turn these random side conversations that aren't directly in your face, but you'll find yourself still reading it, can or usually should add a lot of natural elements within it to make these characters feel more believable, or the world to feel more alive, or to add more lore to the Abyss itself. And there is a ton that needs to go into it, and it does it well. It does it beautifully, effortlessly. And for some it may be overwhelming, but take a deep breath, take your time with it, relax, and I promise you, if you are interested in the story, you will find yourself being hooked very quickly. It is a easy story, beyond easy story to fall in love with. The characters are lovable, the world is lovable, the duality or the false sense of security that it provides, and then this massive surge of darkness and tragedy and soul-breaking moments just to ruin yourself. Because it will genuinely hurt you, especially if you love a lot of these characters or what they're doing or what they stand for. The last thing I'll mention for the overall growth of the story, when you start getting more so into the later half, things get very conceptual, so to speak. For example, the story where it is now around the 60 chapter mark is universally different to what it was at the 10-20 chapter mark. We're still in the abyss, we're still going lower and lower, but the things that have been experienced and the knowledge that you learn from the abyss itself, what it provides, how it evolves, is so creative that it will change your perception of the story in its entirety. And that's kind of the whole point. The recent arc that just concluded itself was so, I would say, meta, creative and unique, and just had this full conceptual breakdown into so many different departments, which will most likely have you being lost a lot of the time. But once again, breathe, take your time with it, indulge within it, and just appreciate the moment. There will be a lot of information that just feels so unique to this moment as you start to fully take in the fantasy element of it all. And very fantasy does it get, but it's not anything that you have experienced before. It really helps that the artwork captures this in such a beautiful way. Sometimes it blends it very oddly and it's hard to decipher, but a majority of the times the artwork is stunning and gorgeous and will show it off in its entirety. If you are looking for a story that is a journey, that is a dive into the abyss, into creativity, into uniqueness, into this indulgence of enjoyment, Made in Abyss is 100% for you. And I would infinitely recommend it time and time again, just based off my own personal experience. I'm kind of disappointed that I took so long to read it, but it was definitely worth the wait. I absolutely fell in love with it, and I believe a lot of you will too. Endtime. So welcome to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you. I would love to hear your thoughts on Made in Abyss. If you've read it, if you're thinking about reading it, maybe you dropped it, maybe it's something that isn't necessarily for you, maybe you didn't like certain elements within it, or maybe you fell so deeply in love with it that you're super excited for, I believe, the second season of the anime, which I feel like will hurt because I kind of have a rough idea of what they're going to cover. Or maybe you're excited for the next chapter whenever that releases in the next 6 months or so. Regardless of whatever it is, let me know in the comment section below. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.